Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We are live with Golden Goliath Resources, and my name is Ashley West, and I will be your host this evening. Golden Goliath Resources Ltd is a Tier 2 exploration company listed on the TSX Venture with the stock symbol GNG. The company is focused on exploring and developing 2 gold properties in Ontario, one near Sault Ste. Marie and one near Red Lake, as well as 4 rare earth element properties in Quebec. The company also holds a 100% interest in the San Timoteo property located in the Sierra Madre Occidental Mountains of northwestern Mexico, as well as NSR royalties on several other nearby properties. To find out more and to receive email updates, visit the website goldengoliath.com. During the webinar, you're welcome to add your questions to the Q&A section. It is located on the top right of your screen. We will ask those questions at the end of Paul's presentation. Now I'm going to turn this over to Paul Sorbara and Gordon MacKay, and we'll let Paul take over the introductions.
Thank you, Ashley, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Paul Sorbara. I'm the founder and CEO of Golden Goliath Resources. I'm a professional geoscientist. I got my master's degree from the University of Toronto in geology in 1979. Then I spent the next 6 or 7 years working for Caminco Limited, which at the time was Canada's largest mining company. Then I consulted for another 6 or 7 years. And then in 1993, I started a private Mexican exploration company based in Chihuahua. And I had a Mexican mining engineer who's still my partner there. And we worked those properties. We acquired properties in Chihuahua based on caldera-related gold and silver deposits that I was looking for, Caminco in Durango in the early 80s. But we acquired a package of 8 properties in Chihuahua, covering an old Spanish mining camp, and we developed them as best we could privately. But by 1999, we had way too much ground that we could ever explore privately. So we decided to do an IPO on the TSX Venture Exchange. We took the Mexican company called Minera Delta and all of its properties and assets, and we rolled them into the IPO, and we went public on the TSX Venture Exchange in October of 2000 as Golden Goliath Resources. And now I'll let Gord introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. I've worked in the mineral exploration mining industry since the early 1980s. When I was a student, I actually worked with Paul with Caminco for a couple of summers. In the late 1980s, I got a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of British Columbia and went to work for Noranda in the Yukon. I spent 5 years working in the Yukon. I did the original exploration and project development on the Brewery Creek project, just east of Dawson City, Yukon. In the mid-1990s, I moved to British Columbia and joined the British Columbia government as a mining advisor. And I spent 2 years with the BC government learning how government works. In 1998, I had the opportunity to move to Nunavut as the director of mines for the new territorial government that was created in 1999. I set up the mineral framework for Nunavut and was director of mines and assistant deputy minister of economic development there for 15 years. In early 2011, or 2012 rather, I moved to Ontario and became the director of mines here in Ontario. I was director of mines here in Ontario for 5 years and responsible for the regulation of mining and mineral exploration in the province. In 2018, my partner and I formed a consulting company, MacKay Mining Solutions, and I left government, and I've been working on this ever since.
That's a perfect place to jump in for Golden Goliath because, as I mentioned, we went public in 2000 with the 8 properties in Mexico, and we worked exclusively in Mexico for 17 years. And we explored and developed those 8 properties over that time. One of the world's largest mining companies, Fresnillo PLC, they liked what we had, and they ended up surrounding all of our claims with their own properties. It extends for many miles in every direction. And then they discovered 9 million ounces of gold contiguous to one of our properties. That's called their Orecibo deposit, which they're now putting into production. At that point, they made Golden Goliath an offer to buy all 8 of our properties. And I was thinking of moving back to Canada anyway. And so it was a good opportunity. But instead of selling them 8 properties, I sold them 7 and kept the 8th one, I believe the best one, for ourselves 100%, and kept royalties on the other 7 that we sold to Fresnillo. So at that point, I took my money and went to Ontario, and that's when I crossed paths again with Gordon, and his new company, MacKay Mining Solutions, was a perfect match for us. They could look after staking and permitting and assessment requirements. His partner is an expert in Indigenous relations, so we had all of that covered. So we started Golden Goliath anew, essentially, in 2017. And that brings us to the next slide, which, come on, slide. There we go. Okay. So come 2017, we now have this portfolio of properties. It's 2 gold properties in Ontario, one near Sault Ste. Marie called the Wishore property, and the other one near Red Lake called the Dixie Road property. And then a couple of years ago, we decided to get into as well rare earth elements. And we now have 4 REE properties in Quebec. 1 we have an option to earn 100%, and 3 we already own 100%. The 2 gold properties in Ontario, we also own those 100%. And then in Mexico, we still have our San Timoteo property, and we still have the royalties on the 7 other properties of option or sold to Fresnillo. There's no production on those yet, so we're not getting any royalties at the moment on those. But I am looking at selling the last property to Fresnillo. So I'll start off, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Sault Ste. Marie, the Wishore property. That's the one we want to work on next. We are doing a financing at the moment, and that's where some of the money is going to go to Sault Ste. Marie. And slide 2, let me just go here. So this is our Wishore property. Sault Ste. Marie would be about 60 kilometers to the southeast. This is Batchewana Bay. This red line is a Trans-Canada Highway, and the Wishore property is only 12 kilometers off the highway. It's located in the Batchewana Greenstone Belt, which is very underexplored. The property itself is 14 kilometers long and follows this red line, which is the deep-seated Carp River Fault. Along the 14 kilometers, there's a 9-kilometer stretch of a high strain zone that lies just south of the fault and mirrors the fault. And within that 9 kilometers, there's another 5 kilometers where we get lots of good gold values on the surface. That includes the gold values that you see on the left of the slide, but there are many, many, many more that we could not put on the property. Basically, wherever you're sampling the intense quartz carbonate alteration, you're getting gold, and there's gold values all over the surface of the property. Go to the next slide. This is our current target area. You'll see the Carp River Fault running along the top of the slide. This is the high strain zone in dark red, and the inflection point in the fault is reflected in an inflection point in the high strain zone. And inflection points or bends or curves in the fault are important because when the fault moves, that creates a zone of dilation or open space so that fluids from below can come up and inject mineralization. So what we want to do now is we want to do an IP survey along the high strain zone, and that will be followed up by diamond drilling. The high strain zone, the IP would identify the drill targets for the drilling to follow immediately after from the north side heading to the south. Gord, you want to add some more about?
Yeah, sure, Paul. Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. So this is an Archean age greenstone belt, intermediate to mafic volcanics. Very little exploration history. There was a little bit in the late 1980s, culminating in 1990. The property then sat dormant until a local prospector picked it up in 2016. He did some prospector work and came up with some interesting values that got us interested in the property, and we optioned it from him in 2018. The area that we're targeting is this high strain zone. It's most likely in our key and age structural feature. We still don't have an entire handle on it. It sits south of the Carp River Fault and mirrors the fault. And everywhere where we sample it, we find quartz carbonate alteration. We find good gold grades, gold values in any sample you take. And it's a very promising target. A high strain zone where it is mineralized has about 5% sulfide in it, pyrite, a little bit of arsenopyrite, a little bit of chalcopyrite. It makes a very good IP target. So our exploration approach is very straightforward. We're going to go in, do IP grid, probably on a north-south orientation, and then the big IP anomalies, we'll go in and target those with drilling.
Yeah, and there's recent prospecting, or prospectors have staked to the northeast. To the north, about 30 kilometers, is the old Tri-Bag mine, and about 100 kilometers to the north is the Wawa corridor. Inco did drill some holes back in 1990 to the southwest. And what did they get there, Gord?
Yeah, so Inco drilled 2 holes at the end of their program. They scissored holes on an IP anomaly, an airborne geophysics anomaly they had. They intersected the high strain zone. They got good quartz carbonate alteration, and they got gold values, but they only got highs of about 1.5 grams per ton over a meter, and then longer intervals of not quite that high. The prospector brought us 2 showings that are just to the southwest and to the northeast of our target area presently. We drilled 2 short holes in those into the high strain zone, more to try and get a handle on the geology and try and understand this Archean age structure, but also to test the values. We got long intersections up to 16 meters of mineralized values, but low grades. We got 100 ppb, 200 ppb, 700 ppb, up to 2 grams over a meter. I think we had 1 3-gram section there that was 1.5 meters or 1.5 grams. But we know, there's a lot of smoke in this area. We've got the high strain zone picked out. It's just a question of doing some good geoscience and locating the ore deposit that we're confident. Those 4 holes that we drilled, the 2 on either showing, were 3.5 kilometers apart. So we've got a 3.5 kilometer of the best of this zone that we're going to focus on now.
Yeah, and Gord mentioned that Inco did airborne geophysics. We did as well, and we got very good results with 18 areas of interest, and this represents only 1 or 2 of those areas. So as I said, we're doing a financing. We want to raise up to about $750,000 for this property. That would cover the IP and maybe 2,000 or 3,000 meters of preliminary drilling into the targets that we generate. Questions will come later, so I think I'll move to the next slide, which is our REE project. We call it the Manicouagan project, and we're located north of Baie-Comeau here, east of Quebec City. I got interested in REEs a couple of years ago, and it was hard to find properties. And then about 1.5 years ago, a prospector brought us this one that was called Ernest. And I like the values. I really like the setting. I'll explain that in a minute. But so we optioned Ernest, option to earn 100% for cash and stock over several years with a small NSR. And then we went up and started working last summer on this property. And then we staked these 3 other properties that we now own 100%, and we've done preliminary work on all of them. The reason that I like this area so much, apart from the fact that the Quebec government has done a regional geochemical sampling and there's lots of REE values in this particular area, But this red line is Highway 389, which you see here running up the slide. It's a beautiful highway. And that gives us great access. It bisects the 4 properties. But the reason that highway is there is right here. And this is actually the Robert Bourassa hydropower dam. And it supplies electricity for a lot of Quebec. It's a very important structure. And it gives us all the greatest infrastructure we could hope for, because, some companies have RE properties or remote areas of Ungava or Labrador. But in order to develop them, they would have to build a road and get power. We already have all of that. So our threshold for discovery is lower than what they would have. Gord, will you talk more about the regional sampling that was done in this area?
Yeah, so the prospector, he somehow got interested in this area because the province of Quebec had done regional mapping and regional lake sediment and some rock sampling, but hadn't really come up with any values of interest for people looking for base metals or gold or silver. The prospector went and looked at the REE values on those samples that the Quebec government had taken, and he found some really strong anomalies on the Ernest property. So that's why he staked it. Myself and our Quebecois geologist, Francois Berniol, we looked at that data set in probably a lot more detail than what the prospector had looked at it, and we came up with 3 more targets: Victory 21, Citadel, and Bedard.
Yeah, so we started work last summer on all 4. We did preliminary geology, which was very encouraging. Then we also did a radiometric survey on both Ernest and Victory 21. And I'll go to the Ernest radiometric survey right now. So the radiometrics are in color, and this survey found 10 high priority anomalies and 30 more anomalies of interest. The high priority ones are the ones you see as marked as red dots with letters. And the geophysicist who interpreted the data said the anomalies of interest may be just as strong as the primary anomalies, but buried under some overburden. And the picture that you're looking at here, the contours, which are a little bit fuzzy on this presentation, but the contours are high-level magnetic data, aeromag, flown by the Quebec government, and that's draped on a LiDAR base map. The mag is important for us, and we decided and conducted last December to do a drone mag, low-level drone magnetic survey over this property, over this area, in order to help us identify the specific units that are carrying the REE values. And we just are getting that interpretation of that work in right now, and it's going to be very helpful to us. And so as part of this financing, we're looking to raise up to about $375,000 for work on this and on Victory 21, which is this property. Again, the radiometrics are in color. We have 14 high priority anomalies on this property and 9 more anomalies of interest. The red lines here are logging roads. So not only do we have a highway, but the area has been logged, so we have easy road access to all over the properties. And the drone mag survey was completed on this property as well. And we're just putting, just as I mentioned, we're just getting that interpretation in right now and planning our work for the summer. Gord, can you say anything more about the REE values and radiometric?
Yeah. So these are really fascinating projects. It's fun to be working on an REE project. We've got kind of basement gneiss materials that's been disrupted probably in part by the Manicouagan impact event. It's cut by some interesting granites that are quite unusual looking, and then some big pegmatite bodies. These pegmatite bodies are the main target, and there seems to be 2 generations of them. One generation that has quite a bit of magnetite associated with it and relatively low REE values, and another generation that doesn't have the magnetite and has higher REE values. Our drone mag survey that we're looking at now again, not to great surprise, it seems to show that we're getting the radiometric anomalies along the edge of mag highs, but associated with mag lows. And what we really need to do now, and we're very excited to do, but we got to wait till the snow goes, is to get back in here and do some ground truthing of these targets, because they're fairly large targets, and it's an exciting project. It's a fun one to work on. It's a beautiful place to visit. Also, it's very nice.
Let me back up for a second here, ladies and gentlemen. There's a very interesting feature right here, just immediately north of our properties, and that's the Manicouagan Impact Crater. So 240 million years ago, a large meteor hit the Earth here. It's the fourth largest known meteor crater on the planet, and it melted the crust for several thousand meters and affected the rim zone where our properties are for a distance of 40 kilometers from the center of the impact. And I personally believe that the emplacement of RE mineralization is somehow related to the impact. I don't have proof for that, but I believe it. And I know that certainly around the world, impact craters have produced a lot of interesting mineralization in the past. Sudbury is an excellent example. There is not a Sudbury deposit here that we know of, as the center of the island was drilled many decades ago looking for a Sudbury, but they did not find that. And because there were no base metals or gold or silver in the geochemical work that the government did, the prospectors ignored this area. So it's kind of virgin and up to us to do the next work. So the stripping and trenching groundwork that Gord mentioned, that's to identify the drill targets. We can do that in the spring and hopefully drill this property later in this year. And so as part of our financing, we're looking, as I mentioned, for about $375,000 for that work. I'm going to go back now to Ontario for gold. The reason I went to REEs first is we're not trying to raise any money for this property at this particular moment. And the reason for that is the permit that we have for this planned work is not been approved yet. Could be approved next week or next month. But at the moment it's not. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. But here in the lower left, you see the red part of the Red Lake camp. This is the southern portion. Red Lake is further to the north. The dark blue property here is the Great Bear property. It was taken over by Kinross. Their gold is associated with a deep-seated fault. The Great Bear Fault runs right along here, and their gold is located just east of that little lake right in this particular area. This is the BTU property in light blue that Kinross has already done a deal with them. And then this is our property, the Dixie Road property, just down here to the south. And we have a fault that runs right along the southern edge of our property. It's called the Packwash Fault. And we looked at government seismic data that was very deep looking. It was done by the Ontario government several decades ago, looking for places to bury nuclear waste. But we got the data and we realized that the fault that hosts Great Bear and our fault are connected at a depth of 14 kilometers. So that's why we got really keen on this property. And when we first started to do work on the property, all that work was right down here in the south along the Packwash Fault. And what we were doing is digging test pits with a small excavator and looking for samples of the glacial basal till underlying the overburden and examining that till for gold grains. And the gold grains, if you can identify those as gold grains on the top part of the slide here, we got excellent values, very pristine gold grains in a lot of the samples. Maybe a third to a half of the pits we dug, we could not get deep enough to get a sample, but we got enough of this that we knew they were analyzed by overburden drilling services in Ontario. And they said that these grains, because they're angular, did not travel more than about 500 meters. So we started several years ago, 2018, I think, to drill holes into the fault itself from the south, looking for the source of this gold. But we did not find that gold source. So we've revamped. We want to go back now, and each one of these yellow dots is a site where we want to do test pits for basal till. This time we would use a small overburden drill as well as the excavator so that we should be able to get a sample at every site. And we'll use the vectors from those samples to determine where is the most likely place for the source of the gold that's abundant in the till around this area. And I don't know why the permit hasn't been approved yet. Gordon will mention that in a minute. I do know that the area has been logged. It looks like the moon. These are all logging roads all over the property. And all we're going to do is drill a little hole and take a sample and then fill it back in. So there's no major land dispute. Gordon, can you tell us a little bit more about the permit?
Yeah, the two local First Nations we've been in touch with and we've worked with. However, further to the south, there's First Nation Grassy Narrows that originally wasn't consulted on this project. Their traditional territory extends up just to the southern shores of Beauregard Lake, you see there on the slide. They were very concerned with the government having not consulted with them, and they've raised concerns broadly about the government's consulting associated with mineral explorations, and specifically with our project. They recently sent us a series of questions that the government has asked us to respond to. We've sent them pictures showing the sites, showing our till sampling, and showing the area of the logging. I think it's just a question of just being patient with the process. I don't think there's any concern that we won't get the permit to do the till sampling. It's very low impact activity, and we're confident that we'll get the permit, but perhaps not until later in the spring.
So the reason I did this after the rare earth elements is that because the permit is not in place yet, it would be wrong for me to try to raise money in our current financing with this as part of the use of proceeds. So the two projects we want to work on are Wishore and Quebec. We'll go to the next slide here, which this is now Mexico. For more background on the company, on the lower left here, you see the state of Chihuahua in yellow and the state of Sonora in gray, and the Sierra Madre Occidental, which is the largest expanse of tertiary rhyolitic rocks anywhere in the world, runs right up and down the spine of this trend. And these are all silver and gold deposits along that trend. Our district is right here. A lot of these deposits are related to caldera features. And my master's thesis was done on a caldera in Canada in association with the Geological Survey of Canada. And so in the early 80s, I was working for Cominco in Canada in the summers, but in the winters, I was working down in Durango State to the south here, looking for calderas and their associated mineralization. And that work was very, very interesting and eye-opening for me. And so I always had a great hankering to get back into the Sierra Madres. So when the foreign investment laws changed in 1993 to allow foreigners to own 100% of a mining property, I was one of the first Canadian companies to go down there and do it. I had very good contacts in the country. The former ambassador to Canada was my lawyer there. My ex-wife, her cousin was married to Vicente Fox, the president. So I knew really in 92 that those foreign investment laws were going to change. So when they did, I brought in my Mexican partner. He's a mining engineer with lots of experience in the Sierra Madres, told him about my work on calderas in Durango and that I wanted to find similar settings in Chihuahua. He immediately brought me to this town of Uruachi, which is an old Spanish camp dating back sometime into the 1700s. This coin here, it says Mineral de Uruachi. So that coin was mined and minted in the town of Uruachi at least 100 years ago, because all the mining shut down at the time of the Mexican Revolution in the 1920s. So up here on the right, you see the district. So Fresnillo would now be everything on the slide plus more. And our 8 properties all covered old producers. And we sold them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this is their Orecibo deposit right here, where they have 9 million ounces of gold. And we're keeping this. We have still the San Timoteo property located here. That's this one here. And it was one of the biggest past producers in the camp. The biggest, actually. This is a section through that San Timoteo property. This yellow line you see here is a tunnel, and it's the lowest adit level because there's a river just over here. You can't go any deeper. And that tunnel is 500 meters long, 3.5 meters in diameter. We've done extensive sampling inside the tunnel, and we see we see excellent gold grades. There should be on the left of the slide, although one seems to be cut off. But there are 3 different zones with very excellent widths and silver and gold values. More silver, of course, and gold. 251 for 84 meters, 32 meters of 212, and the third one is somewhere behind that logo. There's also a manto or blanket zone that goes in and out of the page, and so we couldn't really plot it on this section. We did clay mineralogy studies to try to figure out where we were vertically in the epithermal silver and gold model, and we found out that the tunnel is definitely above that level of boiling or the bonanza zone, and there's no drilling been done down here, and so this is the prime target area. We also know that there are intrusive porphyries below this system, and there could be a porphyry copper down there, as there are in some of these type of systems. And so it's a big target, and that's why, it was the primary. In this tunnel, there were railroad tracks in there, then they dragged that steel across the Sierra Madres by horse and cart sometime back in the 1920s. So that was a lot of work, and they wouldn't have done it if it wasn't a lot of mineralization and gold and silver in these properties. I have individual samples from old dumps that were extremely high grade. There are also some tailings on the property that are still very good grade. Let me just see what's next. So our plan is to sell this property to Fresnillo. I couldn't sell it originally because we would have had no properties, but I can sell it now, and our asking price is $1 million US. That would go directly into the till of Golden Goliath Resources, as would any royalties we might get from the other 7 properties that we optioned. So kind of in summary, Golden Goliath Resources is a very stable company. We've been around for a long time. The people have all been together for a long time. Our CFO, Stephen Pierce, is a lawyer, an accountant, and was a mine manager. I've worked with Stephen for 25 years. Our executive assistant, who does all of our filings and TSX work, I've worked with her for over 30 years. She's been with me since the beginning of the private company in Mexico, and Gord I've known for 40 years. So we only have 26.7 million shares out, fully diluted. We're stable. We have a low static burn rate. I just have a small office in downtown Vancouver, which is a desk outside of one small room where I sit. Most of the work, including right now, I do from home. And the other people involved here are myself, Stephen. Danielle is our Mexican mining engineer, who is the head of the operations down in Mexico. And then we also have, as we mentioned, Gordon. There's Francois and Peter. This slide is a little bit blurry here for some reason. But our other directors of the company are my cousin, Edward Sorbara, who is one of the principals of the Sorbara Group in Ontario and Canada, and Toronto, very large real estate development firm. Edward doesn't know much about geology, but he knows a lot about business, and he's there to give me and the company business advice. Frank Hogle is a well-known market man. He's a director and CEO of a bunch of different companies, and he's based in Frankfurt, Germany, where we trade under the symbol GGZA. And so, we're a stable company. We're not a bunch of fly-by-night kind of guys. We've all been around forever. And so I think that's about it for the presentation. Maybe this would be a good time, Ashley, for any questions that people might have.
Sure, we will go to questions. Our first is from Corey Power, and he would like to know what the company's monthly burn rate is.
Right now, the monthly burn rate is about $33,000 a month. We're looking at ways that we can reduce that, and I believe we can reduce it to 25. But that'll take a little bit of tightening, but it's not much. And the financing we're doing right now, by the way, is up to $1.9 million. It's a unit offering. We're doing a hard dollar unit at 8 cents with a full warrant at 16 for 2 years. And a flow through unit would be 11 cents a unit for a share plus a full warrant, good at 16 cents for 2 years.
Perfect. Corey followed up his initial question with asking, of the burn rate, how much is that for salaries?
How much of that? About 30% of that is salaries, I believe.
Okay. Francesca Bolton would like to know, does management have money invested in the company? And if so, what percentage of the company do they own? And what is their cost average on the shares?
Well, that's a good question. Insiders control about 16% of the stock. Biggest shareholder has 14%. It's hard to say what their cost base is because everybody, including myself, have been in here for so long. It's hard to know what our adjusted cost base is. Nobody in the company has sold any shares for a long time. My personal share position is a little bit low. I have first to admit that. The reasons for that are I got divorced. That went 50% of my stock. And then I had to buy half of the house. That went more of my stock. And then last year we did a rollback 7-1. So that rolled my position back quite a bit. But I've always set goals for myself and I've always gone out and achieved them. And making a success out of Golden Goliath and finding a mineable deposit is my goal at the moment.
That's great. Donald Kenny would like to know, if you get the money that you were looking for, with the cash the company has left, how much capital will you have, and how much of it is being allocated to the various projects that are being talked about to be worked on?
Well, we would have over $2 million. And Golden Goliath is very proud of the fact that 70% of the money that we've ever spent has gone directly into exploration. All we can promise people, we can't promise you we'll find a mine. We can't promise you that the share will go through the roof. All we can promise is that we're spending the money wisely, using the best geoscience that we can to do our best to find a mineable deposit. And that's all we can say, and that's all we can do.
Perfect. Anna has asked, how would you grade yourself on how far you've been able to bring the property along since you sold the others and came back to Ontario? You mentioned that you believe that you kept the best ones.
Well, we kept the best one out of the 8 in Mexico. And originally we had 2 properties in Red Lake, but our Dixie Road property was much better than the other one. And so we dropped that option and proceeded to complete the option on the Dixie Road property, which we now own 100%. And we have a much better understanding of the geology of that property now. I know the geologist from Great Bear, and he's looked at our rocks, and he thinks that we have the right type of rocks for the Red Lake camp. And if you know anything about geology, we believe there is actually an anticline type structure that goes from Great Bear to the north and folds back down into the earth into our property. And so where they have layers A, B, C, we have layers C, B, A. And so the geology is quite similar in both. And we're very pleased with how we've developed the property so far. I'm looking forward to getting the permit and going back to work there as well. As for Wishore, we've developed that well. Started off with prospecting, and then we did ground geophysics, airborne geophysics, and mapping. Francois, our French-Canadian geologist, is kind of a rock whisperer. He's a bit of a genius, and he's really helped us unravel the structural geology of the property. And we have great hopes for that. The rare earth properties we've only worked on now for less than a year, and they're coming along well, and there's great potential, and there's of course great incentives to find REEs. The supply chain problem with China controlling 80% of the supply. So there are lots of incentives from the Quebec government, especially, to look for and develop rare earth element properties.
Perfect. Edward Albert would like to know if there's any overhang in the stock.
I'm not sure what he means by overhang, but I don't think there's any big short position in the stock, if that's what he means. But no, if the stock is all clear and set to go, we have no debt, we're ready to roll.
Perfect. John Smith has asked, what is the cost per meter to drill at your various projects? And what is the company doing to keep the cost down? Although I know you kind of briefly touched on that already.
Well, we've done a lot of drilling in the past, and I look at it as what is the all-in cost of drilling. So there's a cost. When you get a drill contract, it'll say so much per meter for this depth. A little deeper, it's a little higher per meter. But then there's drill moves, there's standby time, there's mobilization and demobilization, there's all that. Then there is the assay cost. We assay the whole core. We don't just sort of pick and hope that we got the right section. So every meter, at least, there's an assay. Assays now are about 30, 40, 50 bucks a shot, depending on what kind you want to do. And then there's the geology, because you have to have our own guys there on the project, supervising where the holes are going, spotting the holes, stopping the holes, logging the holes. So the all-in cost that I've been using is about $250 Canadian per meter. And that's been pretty accurate. And that's what we're doing to estimate 2,000 to 2,500 meters of drilling at Wishore.
Great. Brett Chester has said, hi, I'm a current shareholder. Are there any exemptions small investors like me can use to go into the private placement, or do you have to be an accredited investor?
That's a good question. There's the friends and family exemption. Maybe he knows me. But the best thing you could do would be to send me or Stephen Pierce, our lawyer, an email and find out if you qualify. I'm not the lawyer, so he could say that. But we have had small investors come in for anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000, and we've been able to accommodate them in the past. It really depends on your situation, but Stephen could certainly answer that question for you and let you know if you qualify.
Perfect. And if they want to reach you, I believe your email is listed right on your website, so they can reach out to you to get access to Stephen to ask him that.
Yes, and I believe his email is, mine is JPS at Golden Goliath. His is ST at Golden Goliath. But perfect. Yeah, you can reach out to me and I'll pass it on to whoever, the best person for your question. And I'm always available if you want to email me or call the office or call me on my cell phone if you want. And I always talk to shareholders.
That's great, Paul. Lily has asked, she's kind of followed up the same question. So she's asking if it's a brokered or a non-brokered deal.
This is a non-brokered private placement. Brokered deals are a lot more expensive. You got to pay legal fees to the brokerage firm and commissions and all of that kind of stuff. They take a lot longer. And so it's been a long time since we did a brokered private placement. Non-brokered is much easier, much faster, and we can get the sub-agreements in and close it as soon as possible. And if anybody out there wants more information, send me an email. I'll be happy to send you a notice of our financing that has the terms, and I'll send you subscription agreements. I'll send you financial statements if you like. I'll send you a summary, one-page fact sheet on the company, and the use of proceeds as well, which is drilling at Wishore, trenching at Manicouagan, and some G&A.
Awesome. Jocelyn Moore has our final question, and she is asking if the project you kept in Mexico is still your favorite property.
It's our favorite property, or my favorite property in Mexico. I certainly like Wishore, and I worked and lived in Mexico for so long. I'm happy to leave the Sierra Madres and go back to Canada. I'd much rather deal with bears than with scorpions.
That's great. So that's all for the questions. Paul and Gordon, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I will reiterate again, if anybody would like to reach out, they can go to the website, goldengoliath.com, or you'll find Paul's email on there as well. Feel free to follow their handles, reach out to the company if you'd like to know more details. And yeah, I think that's it from me. Gentlemen?
Thank you very much, Ashley. You've been very helpful throughout all of this, and I hope I hear from some of you people watching.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you.